Turkish and US defense ministers have discussed Syria and the YPG on the sidelines of a NATO meeting, as Turkey's military operation to clear Afrin after the YPG goes into its 27th day. Turkish Defense Secretary Nurettin Canikli met with his US counterpart Jim Mattis in Brussels. Mattis described the talks as honest and open dialogue and urged Ankara to focus on fighting Daesh in Syria, while Canikli called on Washington to cut its support to the YPG. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State has met the Lebanese heads of state as part of his 5-day Middle East tour. Rex Tillerson held talks with Prime Minister Saad Hariri. They discussed Lebanon's maritime disputes with Israel and the role of the Shia group Hezbollah. Tillerson kicked off his tour in Egypt on Sunday and is expected in Turkey next. Caplen is a spokesperson for the US Department of State in London, and he joins me now in the studio. Thank you so much for coming in, Jared. So Tillerson is expected in Turkey today, and basically the most important visit so far, I assume, is the third visit he's going to make. But the relations have been strained of the NATO allies, and there are fears that the two countries could clash militarily in Syria. So do you think this war of words could get out of hand?
Well, what you mentioned at the very beginning is extremely important. The Secretary's visit to Turkey is part of a regional tour where he's meeting with counterparts and heads of state from some of the most important allies we have in our war against ISIS, the terrorist organization that is rampant in Iraq and Syria and is a threat to all members of the international coalition, including the US and Turkey. The Secretary's message is going to be, as it has been throughout his mission in the region, that we've accomplished a lot in trying to eliminate ISIS fighters from the battlefield, but there's a lot more that we have to do, and we can only really accomplish this through increased and prolonged American-Turkish cooperation. Turkey is an important ally of the United States through NATO and in the international coalition. Just when you're talking about cooperation, we've heard from the US Defense Secretary and the Turkish counterpart. Let's just listen into what they had to say and talk from there.
We discussed that the US should not be siding with terrorist organizations, but with a NATO ally, with Turkey. This would be the right way of solving this. So I had the opportunity to express these views to Mr. Mattis.
Throughout this, the one thing that has marked our communication is absolute honesty and transparency with one another, and a full briefing by the Minister of Defense of Turkey to the assembled 29 nations on the military operation they have going on, and we continue to collaborate on ways to ensure their legitimate concerns are addressed. But our goal is to get this into the Geneva process and solve it. It will not be solved by Assad or by the Russians or by anyone else. It's got to be solved under the UN auspices, and it's got to be done that way.
Well, the statements just came before Tillerson's visit to Turkey, so what do you make of it?
Well, what the Secretary of Defense said is extremely important. What he said is that the United States and Turkey share an alliance relationship through NATO, and that our relationship is, as you suggested in the past, it's going through a phase where we need to rebolster our relationship through increased dialogue. And that's the reason Secretary Tillerson's visit is so important at this time. We do enjoy very frank, very honest, and very robust conversations with our Turkish counterparts. Their cooperation with us and our mutual endeavors to defeat ISIS is critical to achieving the President's agenda, which is at the very top of the list of which is defeating ISIS, which is a threat to both the US and Turkey. And again, the Secretary is going to have a very honest and open conversation and hear out our Turkish friends on their concerns.
And what about the differences on YPG, which is the main issue there, as it's off the border of Turkey, and they have been fighting PKK for the past 30 years, which they consider YPG a branch of PKK, but the US is supporting YPG. So do you think they can find a common ground, or is the US actively pursuing this policy towards a Kurdish independent region in Syria?
Well, the United States is working with the Syrian Democratic Forces, which includes Arabs and some Kurdish elements. But what we really need to focus on is that we all share the same objective, which is to defeat ISIS. And the United States is going to, in its conversations with Turkey, be very honest and open, hear their concerns, and find ways to work through this and to come up with a solution. Secretary Tillerson has called for restraint from all sides, and that's really the most important message that we have going into this meeting. Again, we expect it to be very honest, as you would talk among friends, and that's the nature of the American-Turkish relationship.
What if Turkey wants to pursue this operation after Afrin to Manbij? Are they on the same page there?
Well, our goal is to make sure that we're trying to protect civilian populations. The Secretary of State and U.S. officials have been very clear that Turkey has the right to defend its people and its territory. But we need to make sure that we're trying to find all avenues to exhaust all opportunities to maintain peace along the border and to try and work in an area of cooperation to maintain our focus on defeating ISIS.
So you believe this will reduce the tensions? Well, thank you very much for coming in, Jared Caplan.
Thank you.